How's it going then?
Good afternoon, this is Oxinity Channel on Education. We've been discussing how to approach teaching beginners in previous sessions, but today we've chosen again to talk about it on purpose because we do think that good skills or good teachers are proven
They
when
can't
they
hear me. Hi.
actually
Oh,
teach beginners. That was Kevin. So, okay, let me introduce you to the participants today. We have Graham Bell and
Hi.
Anna and Kevin in Barcelona. Can you hear us, Kevin? Yes. And Micaela, who is in Madrid. So, my name is Radmila Gurkova. Let's get started. Now, today we've decided to provide some practical tips on how to teach beginners and create a real learning experience rather than talking about theory. So, in the first place, let's start with something very crucial and essential, which is providing instructions.
Yep.
So, how do we provide instructions for low-level classes?
Me. Really, well, for me, for an absolute beginner, really slowly, clearly, very simple. Nothing too complex. I mean, in present simple.
Which is, well, very relevant for the student, very determinant. And tell us, so what is the first moment with a student that speaks no English?
Well, I developed my theory, let's say. It now has a name, circle theory, circle model. Well, the first thing I do, because I imagine myself, do I really want to meet a teacher who teaches me everything and I'm like, with no idea about what I'm talking about? So I understand that what I need to do is I need to show the student how much does the student know. When somebody tells me, it's my first class in English, I don't speak any English. I don't believe that. Because I take a paper, I take just a little piece of paper and I just draw a circle. I draw a circle and write English in this circle, right? Then I draw some arrows, right? And I ask student to tell me the words they already know in English. Then it's kind of a brainstorming. They say yes, no, hello, thank you, 1, 2, 3, 4. They mostly know the kind of word. Then they know words like car, international, computer, this kind of word they already know. So I give simple instructions if they don't get that. So I draw a circle for myself and I draw the words I know in Spanish, for example, or in English. And then I ask them to do the same. I give just a paper and say, paper, draw. And then we pronounce this kind of words. And after that I say, how many words do you know already? And then I use those to make some conversation. So basically they feel more motivated, because I understand wow, I really know this stuff. Right.
What about you, Graham?
I was just thinking of what you're doing. It, for me, just thinks of it's building layers. It's not treating a student like they know nothing. And for me, I remember when I first started teaching, before I worked with Oxinity, I used to introduce vocabulary in a class first. This is the target language for the class today, and specifically vocabulary, because once I know they've got it and they understand what it all means, then I'm going to get them to use the structure with that vocabulary. And I think when you establish what someone knows already, then you can teach them with the vocabulary they know already. And everyone listens to English music. Most students do. They have learned some of these structures before. There is a layer you can build on, and when you identify that, then you can build with it. It's like I was talking to Kev earlier. I'm not sure if he's still with us, but about just talking in the present simple. But it's quite difficult in the class when the student decides to use a more advanced grammar level than you're planning on teaching in that class, and you're like, do I downgrade your knowledge or do I work with it? So sometimes having that as you said, that brainstorming session at the start. What do you know? Help me.
Exactly.
The teacher, so I can build with it.
Because the beginners, they have, I think, the beginner level, the first level, it has around 10 mini levels in it. Because you have a very beginner who doesn't know no ideas, another beginner who knows I have a car, I have a family, another beginner who knows I am a director of international company and I speak French, English. So there are different levels of beginners, right? So you don't teach all of them
Yeah.
with the same material. That's why you have to know what do they know, so then you provide and speed up this process. We don't want the beginner to go through all the sessions that they must go if they know it already, right? Why? It's a waste of time, I guess, for me specifically. We speed up the process.
Of course. Michaela, have you had
Yes.
like a first experience ever with a student that has no English at all?
Yes, I have, and it was kind of scary because I wasn't sure like what I was supposed to do. Um, but I always keep with me two sets of flashcards that I normally use with kids. It was a complete beginner, but like she's older. Um, and I try not to use flashcards with older people. But one set of flashcards is about animals, and the other one is about sports. And basically, what I try to do in first classes is show the flashcards and see what their level is. If they can recognize the name of the animal in English, if they can say where the animal lives, either if it's like in a forest, in a farm, if they can say like the color, etc. To see like their level. And with this student particularly, I showed her the animal flashcards, and I could like start to see that she did know some things that maybe she picked up from like TV shows or music or whatever. And from that, like that images I could start to build up, like, okay, this is like a horse, and like what do you do with a horse? You ride a horse, etc., etc. So yeah, try to use like have an activity that you know you can use for every level, and just use it if you find yourself in that situation.
Okay, in any case, isn't it a little bit difficult to jump into this type of vocabulary in a very first class?
I think that it really depends on the students. There are students that are really shy at the beginning and don't really like to answer questions like about themselves. So I think that doing something that is completely different until they start to build some sort of like they start trust with you is better. You know, I find it especially with, well, that's especially with kids in the first classes, it's hard for them to speak about anything other than an activity. So no, I think it helps in most cases.
Okay, because sometimes I have the feeling that we're still teaching. I mean, we take very good steps to presenting
Hmm.
the new material, and we
Yeah.
take one thing at a time, one step at a time. So, one new function, along with more generic words such as this and that, etc., etc. But
Hmm.
sometimes we forget that we're living in the 21st century, and people need
Yeah.
to say or to communicate and to transmit things about themselves. And for instance, instead of, I
Yeah.
mean, a classic is, do I teach the alphabet or I teach you how you can spell your email address? Because
Yeah.
this is the thing that you will need to do eventually after a
Yeah.
first
Of course.
meeting. Yeah, so which comes first? I mean, do we have to go in a like linear way of first I teach you the letters, the alphabet, then I teach you the present, then I teach you. Is this the approach that we should take?
Not really. I
No,
think
I personally think that that's not necessary. I think that each student has like a goal when they start learning English, and we should try to, as much as like to an extent, try to do that. Like, for example, if it's a business student, do the email thing, or for example, if it's a kid, maybe their favorite sport or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anna, I think that you wanted to say something.
yes. I think that alphabet is especially for language for other speakers who use vocabulary similar to English. I mean vocabulary letters similar to English ones. I think there is no purpose to teach alphabet at all for me. I guess.
Unless it's for email address.
Oh, this is
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
exactly.
to pronounce letters, to spell letters when we have to write an email address or our name, for example, if the
Yeah.
name is complicated and so on. But going through alphabet like we were in at school, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I mean, I still remember the song, but did it have a purpose of that? I mean, we teach language. We don't teach alphabet. We don't teach parts of the language. This is I think this is the case of primary school, you know, but not really for.
I think one of the things that's come up from what some of the teachers have been saying is that breaking down, you have like letters and things.
Mhm.
It's good, but it's the pronunciation of them. It's the phonetic.
Yeah.
And what are some of the comments we had from the group in Madrid was, when you're working with students, is how do you break everything down? Because it's like, even from a sentence to a word, there's the amount of breakdown you have to do for a student, or like whether it's syllables for a sound and breaking down the phonetic part of it, or even down to the components of a sentence. You know, I think when I'm explaining something, I take pauses where they're not supposed to be with beginners. So I'll be like, I am, pause, Graham, the teacher, to give them time to go, oh, duh, duh, and work out as I go through. And the same with phonetics.
Mhm.
Like for saying a word, I remember teaching someone petrified the other day at a higher level, perify. And I'm like,
No.
petrified. And it's these little breakdowns that are so important at a lower level, and then you showing them it, breaking it down, going backwards, and then getting them to use it. And with a word that advanced as petrified, I wouldn't have been able to teach its meaning if someone hadn't been taught scared at the lowest level. And I think that's the sort of words we have to teach at the lower levels, is the happy, sad, because happy goes way up there with loads of happiness, and sad goes from everything from down in the dumps to grief-stricken to suicidal, you know.
Yeah.
So you need to have these are the kind of words that I like to show. And then working with, when we talk about building more experience and being able to describe how you feel, it's the adjectives that then start to come in.
Mhm.
And that's when I became a living emoji when I was first teaching, you know, how to do a shocked face, a scared face,
Exactly.
and all these things. And that's, I think a lot of people say this, when you're teaching beginners, you have to be a good actor, because you
You
start
must be.
symbolizing everything in the way you move, and it's really tricky. You have to be quite into it, right?
Yeah.
Did you find the same when you were starting with kids? It's for kids with beginners.
I mean, beginners and as I told the kids are big adults.
No, beginners, yeah.
Sorry, adults are big kids. So definitely, I'm acting a lot, and sometimes the students who are used to me, they know that this gesture means that you have to continue. This one means that it's thank you. This one means that it's good. This one means that the lesson is finished and everything was great. You know, this kind of also gestures that you use to explain things. You don't change them all the time sometimes, but I use them like the same thing for the same meaning, right? When they don't understand. And of course, you must act a lot, really, because if they don't understand the word, if they don't understand what is a shape is, so you have to do like meh, you know, and this kind of things.
So Beatrice earlier was doing this
Yeah.
for greetings,
Yeah.
and I was like, that's fantastic. You know, we all start our class with hello
Yeah.
and goodbye, and when you're introducing your classroom language, which is something we were talking about earlier, it's like, if you don't know what you're doing, you need to learn how to do it in class. So sometimes it's learning repeat, you know, or I don't know, you know, or slower. Things like this, the TPR mixed with the classroom language is fundamental for me for a beginner class, because I literally couldn't speak any Spanish when I taught English, so I had to do that.
Exactly.
You know?
I actually will take a point, several points here.
Mhm.
The first is about the syllables. The syllables, because you said that if we break it down into syllables, the students acquire better pronunciation. It helps them. And also, they can learn a lot of words that have similar suffixes or
Yeah.
prefixes. Profession. If they learn to say profession, they learn, even with a different spelling, to say, I don't know, pronunciation.
Yep, yep.
Okay,
Television.
television is exactly television, and so on. So to break it in syllables is actually a very good advice for teachers. Use it from the very beginning. More than teaching even spelling, I would say break into syllables.
It's giving them that confidence of our increased vocabulary.
And patterns.
Yeah.
Speech patterns. Another idea, you were saying about classroom language. Okay, so, and you said, I don't understand. How do we ask for understanding? Because how do we check for understanding? Do we just say, did you understand?
Not really.
No.
How do we do it?
I've made that mistake sometimes, and then you
At the
get on and
beginning.
you're like, hang on a minute, they said they understood and they clearly didn't understand anything. I don't know what, using synonyms, you know, like, can you give me another, if it's with vocabulary, it can be quite easy. It's tougher with Well, actually, no, you have to force them, and this is when the inversion starts to come into your classroom. Because in order for them to use the right grammar, I'm going to ask them the question that forces them to use it, and there's no other way around it. And that's the only time when you know they've developed a skill. But saying something and going, do you understand? I know what I'm like. I'm a typical guy. I'll be like, yeah. No idea. No clue.
Well, I sometimes what I do is I try to ask questions, right? For example, if I was teaching, I have a family, I have a daughter, I have a mother, I have blah blah blah. Then I start instead of asking, do you understand or did you understand? I ask questions related to other situations. Let's say I will ask, do you have a car? So if the student required to have, the student will answer, yes, I do have a car, or no, I don't have a car, right? So I use, let's say, different situations with the same structure. If it's about structure, if it's about vocabulary, I do some role plays and games, like, you know, to show something without saying any words and so on. So this way we can check to understand, because if we really ask, do you understand? Most of people will say, yes, I do.
Always.
Yeah.
Because they're too shy to say that they don't.
Especially in a group class. No one wants to look like an idiot.
Yeah.
Graham, I think we have quite a lot of comments
We
from
do.
teachers.
We do.
So-
I was having a look at these. It was the question that we put to them saying, you know, what kind of teacher are you? I mean, are you a grammarian or are you a functional led teacher? And then roping in with that, what do you think is important? Is it important to teach them grammar, or is it important to teach them function? And we've had some interesting responses come back. I think one of the ones here was for adults. They want to know what they are learning, and they need that because they want to make a connection with what they already know. And I think that's really interesting. I've worked with the TEFL program, and I've seen from students and teachers' perspectives what they're both doing. And a lot of, if someone is Spanish and they have a real strong understanding of Spanish grammar, then they then want to know the English grammar that goes with it. And if you don't provide it, you fight them. It happens. It happens. But in general, it's teaching survival skills. It's the one thing that came back from a lot of teachers, is saying, oh, let's teach them functionally so they can use it somewhere.
Which was back to the question that Kevin was raising before. He said, okay, do we have to keep everything in the present, or if we teach a function, then the corresponding grammar that goes with it, which makes a lot of sense. So if they want to ask something, yeah, they can say, I want this, which is the first thing that we will teach them. But they can say, I would like, which is probably not so tough to teach.
Yep.
But I think it's part of the classroom language. I mean, I would like, sometimes I introduce it, even if I know that they don't understand, but I introduce it within some classes. And after that they understand, so if I say I would like, it means I want. Then we can teach them I would like, without explaining that it's a conditional form of I want, right? So we don't explain that, we just throw it, yeah, and we try to use it. And some things like let's we always teach like during the first levels, and they don't understand what that means, but then they get that let's say vamos, right? So this kind of thing. But I introduce it as a classroom language, as a part of classroom language. I don't teach it as a separate part, because it's a separate grammar. They might find it quite confusing, because they've been using I want, and now they have to use I would like. So it's just to give it like portion by portion, you know.
I remember the point that Kev was bringing up earlier, and the meeting we're having, and it was that if we just stick and teach them something, and we just teach them present simple, and maybe they use something different, you know, are we then only teaching them how to work in one way? And it reminded me of physics. When you study physics at school, and you go to university, they tell you everything you've learned previously is rubbish, and you have to add all this other stuff to it. And that's what we can sometimes do when we teach S1s. We teach them a certain way, and they only can act in a certain way. And then when it starts to grow, they then go, oh yeah, that thing I taught you, don't do it like that. Do it like this now. And that's quite contradictory. And that's one of the points that Kev made this morning, and I totally agree with him. It's one of those things that it's a grey area in your teaching, and you have to introduce little bits of advanced at a time, and because you want to keep it natural. You know, I don't talk like this when I don't talk in present simple. It's why I find beginners so difficult, because I'm like, oh, I've got to talk like this. Well, if that's not natural, then why am I teaching it that way? Do you know? And that's one of the things that Kev said, is that when sometimes you're fighting with an S1 syllabus or a lower level syllabus, because you want it to be natural. I guess when you talk to babies, which is how we learn in the first place, it is quite simple. But we don't just use present simple when we talk to babies.
No.
We use more.
For beginners, maybe we have to get rid of the what is not necessary, stick to the strictly necessary, but then talk naturally.
Yeah.
Because
naturally grading a little bit what is natural.
Right.
Yeah, we have
Okay,
to think what it is.
yeah, let's talk about grading your language. For instance, when we teach a function, yeah, we can link it to a lot of words. How many of them are really necessary? And how do we introduce that function in a natural, in an achievable way, in an easy way?
Let's pick a function. I mean, you find there's so much register to any function as well.
Yeah.
You know, even when you go to the simplicity of hello, you know, you've got hey, what's up, how you doing? You know, you've got all these things, and it's, I guess, sometimes, and I hate to say this, depends on the student, but when you're working with someone, you got to go, well, what form or register do they want to learn of the language? You know, if I'm working with a director of a board and he's on beginning class and it's good evening, sir, how are you? That's the kind of language that he's probably going to want. But if I'm dealing with some kid with his baseball cap on backwards, it's going to be like, hey, what's up? You know? And it's letting that natural kind of language and what flows with it. But you're right, you got to grade it up and down, and you got to think what the function is. If the function is meeting and greeting, then teaching them hello and goodbye, well, there's more to it than that. You know, and it might include a different, you know, what's going on, instead of how are you. You might want to bring that in, and I think that's when it becomes natural and you start fighting, going, okay, I want to use different tenses. And it's what do you think? What do you guys think? Should we be doing that?
I think so.
I don't know.
Michaela, what do you think about it? Because it's very interesting what Graham says, because what's going on, if you think about it, if you analyze it from a structural point of view, we're teaching present continuous here, which is great.
Yeah.
What's going on is the first step to present continuous, and it's something that we hear a lot.
Yep.
How do you feel about it?
I kind of agree. I feel like it's a way that it makes it like the conversation feel more organic, if it makes sense. So I try to, especially in like beginner classes, to not think so much about it and just see like how the flow goes, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Do you guys teach words that are super essential, like think, that can substitute pretty much everything?
Yes.
Like, okay, for instance, what is this thing? This is a pen.
Yeah.
Up to what extent do we want to go for a list of words, or we first have to teach these like building blocks and then substitute by objects?
Yeah.
I just know my own experience. I mean, Anna speaks more languages than me, and so it's probably better to acquire it quicker than I do. But be able to use alternative version of this and that. What's this? What's that? What are these? What are those? If I don't have the vocabulary to know what it is, then I can just point. What's this? It's one of the best things that I can ever have, you know. And or how much is this? If I'm ordering a beer, and I can point at the tap, you know. It's those things when you don't have the vocabulary that are really helpful. And that layering, I guess, of those words, what they call the interrogative pronouns, someone was reminding me the other day, the what's, the where's, the when's.
Yeah.
These are the ones that you've got to start learning at an early level, and then introducing sometimes the possessive adjective, which normally isn't further ahead in the syllabus, but what's your name? Well, you're. Let's make sure that you can do it, and stuff like that. I find, especially when you're working with kids, if you're playing with like toys or whatever, you know, and you're bouncing the ball, it's direction of play. So they need to work with these things, right?
Yeah, and something for me that is really funny is that I find that most of my students know how to say mine. Like, even if they're really young, they know this is mine. Like, this is that's always really funny when I try to like take a bowl or something because they are like distracted and they're like, no, this is mine. And I'm like, okay. So at least you can say that. Yeah. Oh, and especially like trying to, when they are trying to speak, I think that this and that is like the words they go for, because that's like the basic. They can say most things using those words that are more like general, and from that you can start building on like new things. Is this that, or isn't it this, for example, and it helps them.
Great. Graham, do we have more comments from teachers that we can share?
Yeah, the other questions that come in were about dictation and spelling can be good tools to help beginners, and this kind of builds on some of the things we were talking about earlier. Is that what role with kids? When do we introduce the words? Do we do it verbally or do we do it when you're with your kids, Michaela? Do you? Because I imagine there's a lot. You're working in a live environment, so there's no vocabulary there written. So did you introduce things? How do you do it?
I try to just say the words and try to make them picture it in their minds.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I say, I don't know, bed, does a picture of a bed come to your mind? But I think that another thing with kids is that you have to do the concept slow but move fast, if that makes sense. You can't stick to one thing for a long period of time, otherwise you're going to get bored.
Mm-hmm.
So if you keep their minds occupied and you make them think rather than just all the class showing them things, it makes them more interested and it makes it easier for the teacher to be there.
I completely agree. I think that applies to adults as well.
Yeah,
I really like that. That conclusion of Michaela. Yeah,
totally.
It's great. So I think we have no more time. And this talk, everything that could go wrong went wrong, especially at the beginning. But it was great having you guys, really. So thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Graham. And
Thank
Hannah.
you.
Pleasure.
And we'll continue next week with student recruitment, like tips for how to reach more students.
Yep.
Which was a subject that was raised in the meeting. So thank you and see you next Friday.
Bye.
Bye.